Who wants to go first? Great. So a couple of minutes for you to introduce yourself to us.
Hello, thank you for coming tonight. I'm Hynam, NHS worker, trade unionist, father of two local boys down the road. I decided to get involved in local politics because, I guess if I'm completely honest, sick of the state of everything. I remember well over 10 years ago, we were told, tighten our belts, things will get better. As a single father of two, my belt's tight enough, I think, and I'm getting a bit sick of everything that we're being asked to give up, what others don't. There's no accountability in politics anymore. People can waste billions upon billions of pounds, and you know who suffers for that? The kids that don't get their teaching assistants, the elderly that don't get their social carers, the local authorities that don't get the funding they want. But what do we get in response? Gimmicks and nonsense, hostile environments, national service, not actual solutions to our problems. The great problems we have coming up for us, well, they're here now. As I just mentioned, social care, that's a crisis that no one seems to be willing to address with actual solutions. The climate crisis, our whole species depends on it, and also a crisis in society in general. No one feels valued. We have a mental health epidemic which is not being addressed because, again, resources. We have a 1% that are living the life of luxury while the rest of us have to just get by. And for some of us, getting by is not getting by anymore. Thank you.
Who's going to go next?
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming this evening to listen to us prattle on. My name is Euan. I am the Lib Dem candidate for Moray, Nairn, Strathspey, everybody's favourite long constituency name. I live and work in Elgin. I'm a game designer by trade, so I work in a bit more of a newer industry. I'm standing because I think all of us here have been taken for granted. Taken for granted by a Scottish government that's incompetent, taken for granted by a toxic Westminster government. I believe that in politics you need to listen to people who elect you to represent you and take up what matters most to them. That's why we've done a lot of listening about what your local priorities are, and that's what I'm standing for. I am fed up of the sewage that has been dumped in our rivers and our coastline. I am fed up of rural healthcare being in the state that it is. We've been promised time and time again about the maternity board. There is also a mental health epidemic. We need to address young people's mental health in this country. It is all about the local priorities, not national identities, not the things that divide us. I believe in politics works better when people come together on the issues that matter most to them, and that's why I'm standing. So I hope on the 4th of July I'm lucky enough to be your MP, but I'm always looking forward to hearing your opinions and listening to some exciting questions.
Somebody on this side of this. Yeah,
Right, so I'm Euan Morrice. I'm a farmer and accountant from Dufton, and I'm standing for the Scottish Family Party. So firstly, can I say it came a bit of a surprise to be thrown into the general election whenever the Conservatives announced it, and half an hour previously we're in Betfred. But I can say what a campaign it's been. I've been absolutely run off my feet, balancing my work, the farm, our bed and breakfast, and now obviously I've got this campaign to balance as well. Plus I'm getting baptised at the end of this week, so I don't make it easy for myself. Scottish politics is missing a lot. And I feel we've left families and children behind. That's why I'm standing for the Family Party. We're offering a unique perspective that's been long missing in Scottish politics. We're standing on a platform of a marriage tax allowance and ending the disastrous 2-child cap on benefits, and standing on the value of all human life. We stand for free speech, we stand for free expression, and we stand for human rights. One of our more unique policies is that we're neutral on both the EU and independence. So we have supporters on both sides of those issues because we see the social issues in Scotland as being of high importance. One thing I've noticed on this campaign, there has been one person missing constantly, and that is Steve Skerrett of the Reform Party. If you want to vote for him, that's fine. If you don't want to vote for him, that's all right. But I think a politician, if they want to represent you, should be coming and speaking to their constituents. I don't think it's right for a paper candidate to be sitting at home or in meetings in Aberdeen, rather than coming here and speaking to people, no matter how tough it is to answer questions. So I would urge you, if you are thinking about spoiling your ballot or voting for him, we've got 6 other candidates, while I disagree with them, at least they are passionate and they've put in the effort to come and speak to you, whether I disagree with them or agree with them.
Hi there. Oh, can you hear me? Yep. Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you. What an amazing turnout of people. It's extraordinary. I think it's a real testament to the care and consideration that you have around your vote and what matters to you for showing up tonight. So thank you. Now, what motivates me, what brought me to standing as a candidate for the Scottish Green Party, well, it has to be the love of nature. The love of nature and the love of people and planet. I've been somebody who has spent my life as a gardener, a grower, and I later became a chef, a farmer. I've had quite an extraordinary and fruitful life, and that fruitful life has brought me here to the eco-village, and I certainly had an extraordinary experience living here, looking after the woodland garden, and just getting involved in anything that happens to really show up. And this is me, community service. It's been my life. Excuse me, sorry, I didn't realize I get so emotional about it, but I have spent my entire life in service, doing my best to make sure that we live on a planet that is based on equality, diversity, where every species get a chance to live its full life. That we as human beings are part of this natural world, we're not separated from it. And I'm standing because I believe in possibility. I know there's a lot of things going on out there, there's a lot of crises, there's a lot of things to be concerned about, but I always believed in the possibility of a better future and a better life for everybody. And it's that really has me stand and be here today. And I was asked a question, I'm getting a yellow card. I was asked a question by journalists, I think a whole lot of us were, who were our role models? And my role models were David Attenborough. I basically grew up with David Attenborough documentaries and his love of nature. Nelson Mandela, for somebody who fought.
Draeyk, you do need to wind up.
Yeah. And I'll finally say my great aunt, who was an amazing businesswoman. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, good evening, folks. It's good to see so many people here and engaged in politics and here to prepared to ask the questions that maybe make us stronger, which are really important. I got involved in politics when I was about 19. Joined the SNP when I was that age. And there wasn't an SNP branch near us, so myself and some friends basically set up our own branch. We used to say it's going strong, 160 members now down in Lanarkshire. I did that because I believed fundamentally that the decisions that are taken for the place where we live should be taken by the people who live here. I don't know a great deal about what people in Cornwall need, or what people in Essex need, or what people in Wales need or Northern Ireland need. And I think they should have the ability to make those decisions for themselves, and Scotland should have the ability to make the decisions for itself. So fundamentally, I joined because I believed in independence, and that was the right thing for Scotland, and I believe that to this day. I'd be not be a very principled politician if I said that I didn't. There's been a lot of said that we spend too much time focusing on independence. Well, it's a principled position, and I'm not giving up that principle. What makes me tick? Other than that, I would say I'm pretty left of centre in my politics, but I'm also a pragmatist. I've always worked that way as a councillor of 17 years and as a council leader of 4 years relatively recently. Working with people as a minority administration, we got things done and made progress on issues because we were prepared to compromise and prepared to work with other people, and those are the skills that I believe I can take to Westminster to represent Robertson and Strathspey and to make progress on issues. Whilst I will always make a case for independence for Scotland, I'm also aware that's not going to happen tomorrow, and there's a lot of things that need to be dealt with in the here and now, including issues like the cost of living crisis, the impacts of Brexit, and the damage of austerity that is taking so much money out of public sector budgets. And those are the key things that I want to go to Westminster to tackle, because it's what I give them the doorstep: cost of living, and in particular the cost of living, but also the need for money into the NHS and education and infrastructure. And fundamentally, that is not helped by austerity at all. So, other than that, I've got a cat, and I've got probably a slightly excessive interest in Star Wars.
Thank you very much. Kathleen, that's you.
It must be. Well, thank you for inviting me tonight to this Hustings event. Like you, I wear many hats such as vet, wife, mother, local government councillor, leader of Moray Council's Conservative Group, and the leader of the council. For all of these hats, I draw on my range of skills and experience, as well as using the encounters with the public in these roles to inform my decision making and priorities. I was initially motivated to stand for election in 2022 for council, as I had had a taste of politics through my role as president of the Scottish branch of the British Veterinary Association. I was exasperated through COVID with education and social care, and saw my boys and fathers struggle, and the wider public through my role as a contact tracer. I was then asked if I would stand for Westminster, and I said if members want me to, I will go through selection, and the rest is now history. As far as being guided, I have to blame my mother. She was a Question Time and Panorama addict, and throughout my childhood, I remember her staying up late to watch these programmes and election nights. But also back then, we had politicians who were respected and had lived experience. There just weren't the number of career politicians that we see now. My whole professional life has also been guided by professional standards by following the Code of Conduct from the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, and I signed up to that on my graduation. They're based on the Nolan principles of selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, stewardship, openness, honesty, and leadership. These are my values. I have despaired at the lack of these principles being upheld in public life, and I intend not just to follow them, but to promote them. And I could be heading from one of the most trusted professions to one of the least. It's essential we restore trust.
Thank you very much. So, thank you all very much. Again, thanks for showing up tonight, and thank you for standing. It's an act of courage, I think, to stand. So thank you for doing that. And we're going to move to our first question. We wanted to start with a kind of broader, more general topic to start with, and I want to invite Angela Oxley. Angela, are you here?
I am.
You are, great. So we could pass you the microphone and you could put your question.
Thank you, panel. I've been lucky enough to just return from an interrail trip through Belgium, Germany, Denmark and Scandinavia. Although I've been to these amazing countries, my question is not about Europe or the neighbours who seem so contented with life, but about our country. And I want to ask me, this disillusioned, undecided voter, what steps your party will take to restore civic pride in a country which is clearly failing?
Thank you very much. So what steps will your party take to restore civic pride in a country which is clearly failing? Greg, can we start with you?
Okay, thank you. That's an easy question.
We're warming up.
Yeah. So I see a great deal of civic pride in my day-to-day democracy councillor. I get engaged with a lot of community groups, community organisations, and they are full of people who are really engaged in their communities, who are looking at the issues that affect the communities, and who want to make progress and to get them sorted out. Whether that extends enough through the whole society is I think the bigger question, and I don't think it does. You have to give people something that they want to stand up for, and I think a good example of that is the idea that the national service is some kind of answer to all the woes of and instilling a sense of pride among young people. I don't think it is, because we haven't provided them with a society that is actually valuing them. So if you provide them with a society that values them, then they'll value society. And the same applies to. I think we need to have we need to instill values through the education system, but not in you're not in a you must do this or you must do that. It has to be this is this is the positive vision we have for our country. And for me, as an independent supporter, that's about having a vision for the future that is about a progressive socialist country, which is what I believe in, that provides support when it's needed and provides the tools to people to be able to progress themselves and empowers people. Which is why we, as a party, we've supported things like cash first approach to welfare, because it gives people the support, but it doesn't tell them what they should do with it. It gives them the responsibility and the empowerment, and it's that type of society I want to see.
Great, thank you very much. Maybe I could pass to you, Kathleen, and I wonder if you could also pick up on the special national service, which was mentioned. Is that a way to restore civic pride?
I think civic pride is something that has been lost. I think it's been lost over a few generations. I think that it's something that we need to teach our young folk to respect all generations. And if I give just an example, I think some of the way that we run our schools, where we can close them off and keep them away from the public. If we have true community schools, they should be integrating with all generations. We isolate them. They are kept in a school from 9 till 3 most of the year, and they're not interacting with all generations. And I think that is one element that's key. From a national service perspective, it's in the manifesto, as you all have read, for the Conservative Party. Interestingly enough, I have a step grandson, not that old honestly, but I have a step grandson who lives in Switzerland, and he has to do national service, and they really do take a pride, and they get a choice in what they want to do. So that's what's being offered here. They have a choice. They can either go into the military for a year, or they can do community volunteering. And I think it's something we need to restore in our young folk, that it's okay to volunteer. In fact, we need them to volunteer. Our local groups and charities really struggle to get volunteers, and they're always aging. I mean, if you look at Forest and Blue, for example, fantastic what they do. I'm worried if it still exists in 10 years' time. We need to get the young people engaged, and I think doing that kind of thing will restore civic pride. It starts locally, and it grows from there.
Thank you, Kathleen. Pick it up from there.
I think we could restore some civil pride by actually offering some hope. I remember when I was a younger man, and I was pretty lost. I left school with no qualifications. I thought like I was a nothing. And then I was very lucky. I was helped by someone to go to Moray College, get some qualifications, have the career that I have in the health service now, have purpose in my life, managed to get married, divorced, and then managed to buy a house for my children and feel that there was progression through my life, that I had hope. When we're telling people that you need national service because you're not helping society enough, we've let them down. We've shut down their youth centres, we've shut down further education courses. And then all of a sudden we're saying to them, why aren't you helping enough? Well, I'm sorry, I feel they're not getting the same opportunities that I got to be able to improve myself. I see that young, scared young boy when I see a lot of young men that have no direction in their lives at the moment. And I feel actually engaging them and giving them actual services in place. That's how we go forward, giving people opportunities, not telling them what they should be doing, but asking, what are you looking for?
I think it's a really good starting question, so it's good to see that we're already on our toes. I think it says something when a major policy announcement, the civic pride, the national pride, is taking the mick out of that policy on social media instead of the actual policy itself. Young people in this country have been completely abandoned. And an answer to that is not forcing them into a military service. It's akin to things of Korea, North Korea. Like, that's not the answer to this, the answer of pride. We need to give them something that they can believe in, to actually make home ownership not just a pipe dream for young people. I'm 30 years old, and the thought of even being able to afford a home just seems like a distant dream right now. We need to build more houses, and we actually need to listen to people in the heart of our communities. And I'm really glad to hear that we want to see a different standards and accountability, because I'm really looking forward now to hearing that the Conservative, Labour, SNP parties in this proportional representation, something that Lib Dems have wanted for generations. We need to be listening to people. We need to actually not be taking our communities for granted, particularly in the north of Scotland, where we've been promised times and time again over things like bypasses and local healthcare. We actually need to listen and do these things and give young people the most promising opportunities that they can have, not just saying something for the sake of the election when it comes and rolls around. That's not the answer to this. I mean, you look at it in RAF, Lossiemouth, it's just down the road. We don't even have a practicing mental health practitioner on base in RAF Lossie. That's something that we found out as a Moray Lib Dem FOI request. If we cannot even give our military personnel a fair treatment in terms of mental health, what chance have we got of inspiring younger generations or any generation?
Okay, thank you very much. If you want to make reference also to this PR pitch, I believe you could also do that. That's me, so sorry, so we're private on that. But over to you, Draeyk.
Yeah, well, as you can imagine, I'm very much in favour of proportional representation. I think first past the post is an abomination, and we are the only country left in Western Europe that actually uses it, and I think it's extraordinary that we're in this position. But to the question, when I heard it, I was reminded of a project I was involved in London. I set up something called Incredible Edible Lambeth, and that was about bringing communities together. And by bringing communities together, it wasn't just about growing projects, but it was about food networks. It was about bringing different age groups together, different classrooms together with older people. It was a whole way of looking at how we function as a community and how we can bring together, yes, around food, but by doing that, it had huge implications across the board. So people were improving their local neighbourhoods, and they were basically getting a sense of caring, and they were caring about where they lived because they were caring about each other. And I think this is something that's fundamental to what we need to do to instill that kind of civic pride, because it will sprout from caring. And when I look at the things that we could actually be actionable about, one of the things that I'm very, very keen on is participation. And that means that we should see much more citizen-led participation in our democracy and far less simple representation. I think it's outrageous that we just vote somebody in once every 5 years and we say, yeah, off you go, just do what you want to do. And all the promises that have been made somehow disappear into the ether and just things get done in the way that they're done. And I think that it needs to go much more back to the people, so the people have a say in, you know, how money's spent and what education pathways we want to go on. So there's multiple ways in which we can work together, but it all comes back to caring for each other, caring for the world we live in, caring for this planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And Euan.
So just before I begin, I'm going to pick up on something I heard over there. I think you got your Koreas muddled up because it's South Korea that has national services. I don't know if North Korea does. You know, their Twitter account isn't that active. You know, they aren't giving daily updates. But yeah, we have a real problem in Scotland with having pride in our country. And I think one issue that comes back to, you know, I'm the family party, so does it say on 10? I think family breakdown is a big thing. It's heartbreaking and nobody wants to see it. And some of our policies are there to address it. We've got the wedding box policy, which is basically to encourage newlyweds, give them support, similar to the baby box scheme, and it offers like meal vouchers for anniversaries to kind of encourage that kind of relationship. We'd also offer counselling for couples going through hard times, and we would also remove fees from for wedding celebrants and, you know, reasonable fees for marriage and registration. Another thing is education. I think our education system is completely broken in Scotland. I think Curriculum for Excellence has been teaching kids the wrong things. We've moved from an academic system on respect and rigour, and we've gone to a system of learning through play, and whatever the kid wants is right. And I think there's a fine line of balance to be made there. We should be teaching kids to be respectful to each other. We should be having academic rigour, and we should be aiming for academic excellence with exams. I'm going to touch on the proportional representation as well. We are in favour of a more proportional system. I think it engages more people. That's the thing. A lot of people in this country will not vote, and that is a real shame. Proportional representation would engage more of us. We also believe whenever there's a contentious issue, sometimes politicians don't get it right. There should be more referendums on issues where politicians are at odds with the residents.
Okay, thank you very much, Euan. So, I'm going to come back to you, Angela. So you heard all 6 people on the panel. Like, what are you making of it?
I think
Is it helping you to decide?
probably not, if I'm honest. I think you're right. I think as the Leadbitter said, there are people who do participate and want to improve their communities. But as a retiree from working in social housing, on the front line in social housing in this county, there are swathes of people feeling neglected, lost, poor, dependent on benefits, don't know where to turn, often getting involved in crime, drugs, petty crime that develops. I've seen this myself, and that is the problem that I am really worried about. I saw it day in, day out. It's not something I've read about, it's something I've seen, and it concerns me greatly.
I know you're not a politician, or at least not yet, but if there was one policy suggestion you would make, what would it be? Do you have any sense of that?
I think it's lovely and ideological to think that some form of participation works, but sadly it does not. Initially, the thought of national service or some sort of compulsory community service did appeal to me, but the longer I go on, perhaps is an option that I might consider, but I'm not sure, I'll be completely honest.
Fair enough.
It's a starting point.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Maybe one or two other people in the audience want to make a comment. Maybe behind you, woman in the white dress. Thank you.
Hello, panel. Yes, I work at a school, and in our school
we have a community service every Wednesday afternoon. The children go out and learn to mix with the older people. They do fire service, they do all sorts of things. Those children absolutely love it. They have a self-worth about them, and I think that's somewhere forward if we can do that. And I think that's the way community services worked out. You know, that they can go and do something worthwhile and interact in the community.
Great, thank you very much. One more person would like to speak. Yes, also that corner seems to be the civic pride corner.
Might be applicable to me because I'm 19 and maybe I don't know whether I'd be under the national service, but I totally agree with it because it's not about the fact that young people let down, because to some extent the housing crisis has let us down a little bit, but the big thing is that it's really helpful. You know, if you go into the military for a year, you learn life skills, you learn how to get fit, healthy and active, and you have some kind of purpose. Or if you go into volunteering, you know, you stay out of not having a purpose and doing things, going about aimlessly and not being able to contribute to society. And there is, you know, the whole thing of national service is an opportunity rather than a burden or work.
Right, thank you. Thank you. I want to do a little kind of straw poll. Like, how many people think that one way to restore civic pride would be to introduce compulsory national service? You just have to raise your hand if you think that's a good direction to go. Okay, so not a small number, but not a majority either. Thank you. Great. We're gonna move on to the second question, and I want to invite Bob Johnson. Are you here, Bob? Yes, you're there. To put your question.
Given the graveness of the ecological and climate emergency and the current inadequate response of the UK government, what will you, as our constituency MP, do to push for faster, more effective action?
Given the graveness of the ecological and climate emergency and the current inadequate response of the UK government, what will you, as our constituency MP, do to push for faster, more effective action? Let's start with you, Euan. Let's start with you.
So I think we can all agree that man-made climate change is a real present threat to society, to the world, and we should be, taking actions as swiftly as we can to reduce our emissions. I also think there is a balancing act here, because we rely so much on fossil fuels, oil and gas. There's so many things, such as pharmaceuticals, many industries that there currently aren't any solutions for, and I don't see a complete transition away from oil and gas anytime soon. So we should be exploring as many green options as we can. For power generation, we can be looking at clean energy sources. But for other industries such as agriculture, such as transport, the infrastructure isn't there yet, the technology hasn't arrived. We should be supporting our oil and gas industry in the North Sea. Our current policy right now is that we're going to wind down operations here, which are much more carbon neutral than other operations, and then we're just going to import it, kind of wash our hands of the emissions and just import it and blame the emissions on someone else. And I don't think that's appropriate. When we can take steps to reduce the emissions of producing oil and gas here for the limited amount that we'll need, we should be focusing on that. I also would say that I'd also say that we should be setting realistic targets as well. I'm not sure if our current targets are achievable. We should be looking at, are we actually going to meet them? And with targets, they have to be reasonable, they have to be meetable, and our current targets just aren't. So we really need to think about increasing those targets. And also, we could maybe start looking at carbon capture to try and reduce the damage that we've already done.
Okay, thank you very much. And
My goodness, what would I have to say on this subject, Bob? I have to try and align my thoughts because there's so much I could say about it, as you might imagine, being a Scottish Green. One of the things that I said earlier on is my love of nature, and as has been already said, we have lost a huge amount of nature. I think it's about 70% of insect populations. We've lost 60% of our animal populations just since the 1970s. We're 2 out of 5 plant species are now endangered with extinction. We're in a perilous state. And this is something that I think we recognise, that we are unwilling to take the radical action that's needed. And radical action is the only answer to this. And one of the things that I would certainly progress in certain part of the Scottish Greens is that we need to look at things like an ecocide law. We need to have more rights for nature. And we also need to look at things in terms of oil and gas, which is the main, or one of the main contributors to climate change. We need to stop this business of giving licenses for drilling of oil and gas in the North Sea. And certainly one of the things that the Scottish Greens would like to see is revoking all of those new licenses that have been given and using money from windfall taxes and really using that money to spend on renewable. We need to move more towards renewable, and we need to have a workers-led just transition. So the workers who are in the oil fields now need to be tooled up for actually an industry that is the future, which is renewables. And that is the way to go to actually support them in making sure that they still have their jobs, get a yellow card. And the other thing is that we need to be investing in a full-on Green New Deal, and not the very minor, delicate approach we seem to be seeing at the moment. We need to put some real money in there. And certainly what the Greens are implementing is a very minimum of £28 billion. Now that money can come from a wealth tax. And if we tax the 1%, we can bring between 70 and 130 billion pounds into our hands to actually make sure we transition to net zero and support public services. Thank you.
Let's move to you. Maybe we could also be more specific even around oil and gas, like more licenses, no more licenses, more drilling, end of drilling. Where do you stand?
I think I'll answer the question that Bob asked, but I will cover that. I have children, hopefully I have grandchildren, so the sustainability of the planet is important to me. And I think we need to lead by example. And first of all, it starts with you and me. We need to lead by example. We need to recycle. We need to be much less of a throwaway society, which we're going to become. So it does start locally. But then the state has to get involved, and there has to be policies. And what we at Scottish Conservatives have promised is that we're going to accelerate renewables. We're also going to support solar, but not using our prime agricultural land. Let's use brownfield sites that we have. We're going to progress carbon capture and storage, and we're going to bring jobs involved in that locally. So it's going to be in Moray and Aberdeenshire and Aberdeen. We're going to scale up nuclear. We have to do that. It's clean, cheap energy. We need to be independent of energy from the rest of the world. We've seen that with the Ukraine crisis and what happened. We have to be realistic and pragmatic. We can't stop oil overnight. We will always rely on it to some degree. There are so many side spins to the oil industry that you and I are, if you've got rubber in your shoes, if you've got rubber in your cars, we are going to have to use some degree of the petrochemical industry to support us. We can't run out of it completely, but we do need to moderate it, and we do need to accelerate the renewables so that we're using as little as possible.
I think the only thing I would take umbrage with that is we're always going to need it. It's a finite resource. It will run out eventually. We do need a just transition away from oil. We probably get a bit around the edge from here, but I like to be more man. But we need it to be publicly owned renewables. what we don't need is it to be like the oil industry fall into private hands and then never have a say how it's run again. I think it also comes around infrastructure. It's all well and good to tell people, get out of your cars, all this stuff. We've recently just seen we don't even have a bus that goes through Kinloss and Findhorn now. If the state needs to intervene, these are very simple things to do. I can't even get to work without a car in this area. But Labour is going to set up a Great British Energy, love the name, and it will invest in renewable companies. Plan is, I'm going to push for it to be in the north of Scotland, in this area, and for heavy investment in it. Again, like I said, I've been pushing for this to be publicly owned, and for the targets to be as soon as possible, because this is not a case of we can just leave this to happen. We see already a lot of coastal sort of areas already eroding away. This is happening right now. Like Kathleen said, I have kids. I'd like them to have a planet to be on afterwards. Thank you.
I think the buzzword that politicians like to use, and the word we heard, is just transition. We've all heard it, everybody said it. But what is the explanation for that? We need to be on the side of people who are working in these sectors, because they're not the ones that are making the decisions on things like roads planning. They're not the ones who are making billions of pounds in profits that we're seeing from the energy supergiants. That's why Lib Dems, we wanted to windfall tax, we were the first ones to call for it, to promote, to bring down the cost of living and to reinvest in renewable energy. Because at the moment we are facing an ecological disaster, and there's no getting away from that. We need to be investing in renewables. That goes for wind, solar, hydro, the whole shebang. We need to be investing in them, and we need to be doing it now. In terms of more oil contracts, personally, I think we need to review that decision. I think there is a big ecological question about that, and I'm not convinced at the moment. I'm probably kind of sitting there at that moment at the time. But it will mean nothing if we do not use the taxes that we are raising from these energy giants to go and invest, and then also protecting the workers' jobs. Not the ones sitting in boardrooms, not the ones in the energy supergiants, the chief execs, etc., making millions and millions of pounds a year from bonuses. That's what we need to be doing. We need to be investing in the actual green infrastructure. And then that goes, it extends to things like public transport. We have one of the highest train journey costs in the entire country. I mean, it is unacceptable that it's cheaper to run a car to go to Inverness than it is to take a train. That completely seems bizarre to me. It goes for the same if you want to get down to Glasgow, Central Bell, etc. And we also need to try and protecting the skills that come into these industries. We need to actually force these companies to train the people in the renewable sector, because protecting the jobs is the most important part, and that's what actually just transition means.
Thank you very much. Great. More oil, less oil, just transition.
Yeah, just transition is, as has been said, the buzzword, but it is absolutely necessary. My dad, when I was young, worked at Ravenstein, and when that was closed, and it was closed pretty unexpectedly to the local community, it was closed with really no thought to what was going to happen to that community, to the workers that were there. My dad ended up working in Kuwait for 4 years after that, because it was in the middle of a recession as well. So there was no work for him in the profession that he was in. And it took decades for the Motherwell area to recover from the closure of Ravenstein. And the same happened with mining communities as well. We cannot allow that to happen as we transition from oil and gas reliance to renewables and to getting away from our use of fossil fuels. It has to happen as quickly as is practically possible. And we need to invest in it to make sure that happens. The SNP and government has put in £500 million into a Just Transition Fund, and we've called on the UK government to match that funding. We locally, when I was council leader, we introduced a climate change strategy in the council, and that included the work that was started on the biodiversity strategy, which was recently completed. And so there are national things that can be done and local things that can be done, and we need all of those things happening. In terms of the skills, the one thing that I am wary of is that we need the skills of people that work in the oil and gas sector to make the transition. And we shouldn't kid ourselves that it's a very mobile workforce. If we pull out the rug from under them, then they can quite easily go and work in India or the Nigerian Delta or in the Gulf of Mexico. And if they do that, then we've lost skills that we need to make the transition. So it has to go at a pace that works, otherwise we simply won't be able to do it properly. So there's a level of pragmatism required, but it has to happen at pace. And that requires substantial investment from the next UK government, and that requires people to hold them to account.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's come back to you, Bob. What do you feel?
Thank you, everyone. I'm scared, and I think I can tell whether someone I'm talking to is taking climate crisis and the ecological crisis seriously. You can see it in their eyes. You can tell whether they're just going through the motions, and I can vote for anyone who doesn't take it seriously. And I think this is a very helpful process to see candidates talking about this issue. I won't name names.
Thank you. So there were a few other people who asked questions about this. There's someone named a few people who wrote in, like Paul Hibbard wrote in, Leslie Frisco, something related to this, Roger Downer, Alan Gray, Chris Hart, like a few other people who wrote climate or biodiversity, ecological questions, environmental questions. So I particularly want to invite any of those people who'd like to speak now, because you also, in a way, brought the question in from a different angle. So if anybody would like to bring that, you can bring that. Let's start with you, Alan.
Should I just amplify my voice?
No, I think it's good to use the microphone, but thanks for the offer. Great.
Yeah, it's a great question. Specifically, I want to talk about something very practical that's actually live, which is the climate nature bill. Nature is critical for health, for jobs, for food security, and obviously for carbon sinks, for addressing the climate crisis as we know. 100,000 people marched in London calling for us to follow the science and reverse nature loss. And there's a bill that was drafted by scientists. It's cross-party, the climate nature bill. So on the panel, who is backing the climate nature bill, and will you commit to halting and reversing nature loss by 2030?
Okay, thank you. We'll come to that. We'll put that to the panel in a moment, like it's specific around backing that particular bill. But anybody else would like to just bring a point before we go back to the panel? Let's go to the very back here. Can't quite see it. Thanks.
Thank you. I had a question about to do with scarce resources. So websites are increasingly requiring more advanced web browser. App stores such as Apple, not only Apple, require app developers to use high deployment targets, which are not supported by all operators.
Sorry, maybe I'm not so clear. What I want to invite you to is not bring another question, but just like because you brought up the topic in general, maybe there's an angle that you just want to mention.
This is that you said my name out.
Yeah, that's right.
So this was to do with all the different things which are changing about 2G and 3G shutdown, about moving to copper wires and internet-only phone lines, and all these changes mean that many of you will now have, or will soon have, redundant technology in your pocket, or in your home, or in your businesses. And how would your party, the candidates, prevent the waste of scarce resources and the cost to people and businesses of needing to replace mobile devices, laptops and computers, as well as landlines, community funds, about resources.
Right, thank you. Maybe I'll just frame that again. and then we'll just take one more, and then we'll hear a bit more back from the panel around this. So one question that's already in the room from Alan is about, would you back the science-led climate and nature bill upon its reintroduction to Parliament? And then this question is about, how would your party prevent the waste of scarce resources and the cost of people of needing to replace mobile phones, laptops, computers, landlines, etc.? And then maybe one more, let's go to you. Thanks.
What I would like to know is why we have all the windmills and renewable technology all round about Scotland, and I would say next to none of it has been produced here. We have imported it, all the contracts from abroad, and it's being shipped over here, where we have manufacturing bases here which could have a fully managed to build everything here, employment here, and grow our economy.
Okay.
So why is it allowed?
Why is all the technology for the renewables built elsewhere? Okay, so let's just hear that. We want to keep this brief because we also want to get into some other topics still. Let's start with you now.
Okay, so 3 questions here, so I'm going to try and go over them as best I can. So in terms of the ecological bill, absolutely supported completely. We need to go further because we have a massive amount of sewage dumping on our rivers and seaways, as what I was saying earlier. We have a publicly owned Scottish water company that's not being held accountable, and we have Scottish Government putting their fingers in their ears and not actually acting on the issues. We need to be lowering our sewage dumping. We need to be supporting the just transition, as I was saying earlier. On that, on the upcycling, we need to be upcycling our technology. I work in a digital company, I work for it as a game designer. Where possible, we need to recycle these materials for these technologies, or computer screens, or computers in general, phones, where possible for perhaps less fortunate areas, to improve technical literacy, and then also using the components within them to then be used and recycled into newer phones. I'm just thinking of the very companies like Samsung and Apple. They're starting to move towards more recycled materials in their phones, and that is great, but we need to be encouraging it further. It needs to go further than that. And then on the last question, why is it important? Thank you. Why is it important? We have a phenomenal set up at RGC in terms of assembling these amazing wind turbines with great renewable energy sources. But, like we say, it hasn't been manufactured here. We're not taking advantage of the skill sets. There is transferable skills from warehouses in places like Settlebelt, or even here, that these things could have been assembled locally. It would have created jobs. So we should have invested in that. It was a complete drop of the ball, and I completely agree. We should have done better on that, and we should be doing it because the RGC setup isn't just going to be for the next couple of years for what time is built. It's also maintaining them. It's also going to be replacing any damaged parts. We need to get that in place now and get talented workers attracted here now. And how can we do that? We improve local infrastructure, we build more houses.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to be brief so that we can hear from everybody. Thank you. It's great. Thanks, Neil.
Yes, I support it. Upcycling, again, I can only echo what Neil just said. Government needs to encourage and make it the thing to do to actually upcycle the major companies and smaller companies and individuals to upcycle things. And us importing stuff in, it seems to be the way of the last 20, 30 years. Ships built abroad, bridges made, foreign steel, it seems to always be the way. This is why myself personally, I'll be pushing for it to be publicly renewables company so that it's made in Scotland for Scotland, and so we reap the entire benefits of it.
Yeah, the first one on the campus, as a veterinary surgeon, I'm a scientist, so at the moment I'm not going to say yes or no, because honestly I haven't read the full bill and I want to understand it before I commit, and I think that's a reasonable expectation. The second one is the modern technology and resources. I think I touched on it earlier, that we need to be less of a throwaway society. We don't need the newest, shiniest phone or the newest, shiniest piece of equipment. We use them until they're no longer practical, and then we make sure that we get upcycled. We've got a fantastic place locally, Reboot, that does just that. We need more of these enterprises to make sure that happens. And then lastly, why do we not make our own wind farms? I think quite frankly we missed the boat. encouraging companies somewhere in Scotland to be doing that. Maybe RSU will jump in, but they're going to assemble, but hopefully we can manufacture. But I say we need to invest in that going forward.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so first of all, in the Climate and Nature Bill, absolutely full support it. I signed up to in the last term of Parliament because they also asked for support from local councillors. And I'd fully support it coming back in again and being reintroduced into Parliament. On the recycling, I'm in that stage where I kind of, probably like a lot of people, where you end up with a drawer full of mobile phones. But I have managed to find ways of recycling them and finding places that I can either put them on where they can be reused by other people, or where where it can be recycled and the parts can be taken out and the metals extracted and reused. So there are ways of doing it, and as has been mentioned, Reboot is a cracking example locally. We need to do as much as we can to support organisations like that, and organisations like Wastebusters who can do some electricals as well. So there's the local and there's the kind of global. What was the other? Export, yeah, the importing of wind turbine components. There are major components of wind turbines made relatively locally. In Nigg there is a big rolling plant, and that basically makes wind turbine blades from pretty much from scratch, as well as it then being assembled at Nigg and then taken out and installed. So it is possible, it has been invested in, by the Scottish Government. So there is money going into the industry. It needs to catch up a bit. None of these things are overnight. The Haventus investment in Aberdeen is fantastic. And will create many thousands of jobs over the coming 10 years. But it does take a lot of time because there's big facilities that need to be constructed to do it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I suppose this is the quick fire round. So first of all, Climate and Nature Bill. I think there's some things in the bill that are quite positive. Obviously, I haven't read the full fine print of the bill. I would need to do that before I committed to it, because with these kind of one-size-fits-all bills, sometimes there are things that are quite worrying. I haven't read the bill fully, so I can't comment on that. On the phasing out of 2G, 3G, the replacement of copper lines and the costs to businesses, I think this kind of obsolescence, especially with 2G technology, there's a lot of devices that rely on it, a lot of kind of legacy, even government programs that also rely on it, and I think it's important that we at least maintain the infrastructure for these older devices. The cost of business, yes, there's a big problem right now with planned obsolescence. It seems our phones and our laptops are lasting less and less time, and so we've got to take action as consumers to make sure we choose the products that are going to last us. Finally, on why aren't we building our renewable projects here? Well, we don't seem to build anything in this country. In Scotland, we are quite business adverse. I don't know why anyone would really want to set up a business here, because we make it quite hard for them to do so. We should be welcoming of businesses, especially renewable businesses, and making it a much more friendly business environment. I've seen many a time a wind turbine going through the narrow streets of Nairn or Keith, and I think it's a bit ridiculous that we haven't seen that subsequent investment in infrastructure to then match the spending on renewables.
Okay, thank you.
So it's a quick fire round, so let's do a quick fire to you.
Quick fire to me. Well, yeah, Climate and Nature Bill, well, I brought that to Moray Council, and the first council in Scotland to actually support it, along with declaring a nature emergency. And on electronic waste, electronic waste, really it's already been said, built-in obsolescence needs to be tackled. We need to have more standardisation and cooperation amongst tech companies, and we need to certainly make use of reuse and recycle. As for the wind turbines, it's an interesting one because yes, we don't manufacture here, yet this country actually was leading in wind turbines, and somehow we dropped the ball. Or did we?
Because who owns all of these companies? And it's very few British companies that actually own them. They're often owned by overseas companies. And this is something that we need to look at. Yes, we're in a global market, but we need to make sure that we actually are having investment in this country. And while we're looking at that as well, I think one of the things that's really key is that we also must learn to share technology. And there are third world and developing countries that they need to be able to go to net zero before going into oil and gas. And that's where the greatest rise in pollution is coming from, these countries. So we have to learn how to share our technology. And at the same time, this country is a country full of innovation, extraordinary innovation. And we need to be looking not just at wind, but other forms of renewable innovation, such as wind, tidal power, for example, and other opportunities, and make sure that we support that and keep it homegrown. And it's one of the reasons why the Scottish Greens are very clear that we want to have a Green New Deal. We want to put the money into that investment and make sure it stays here and it is publicly owned and that we have a say in it and we have energy that is affordable for this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Robert. I think we've given this climate piece a good airing, so thank you very much for that. I know there's more that would want to come in, but I think we also want to be mindful of the time. We have 20 minutes left for questions, so we want to bring in another topic in now. So I'd like to invite Arlene Hall, if you're here in this space. Arlene, great, let's pass the mic to you.
Hi, thanks Carol for taking my question. This is around the NHS. NHS staff morale at an all-time low. Staff are voicing how undervalued and overwhelmed they are under the current circumstances within the NHS. This is the first time that we're seeing more nurses leaving the NMC register and going on. How do you aim to improve this but also retain our staff?
NHS staff morale.
NHS staff morale is at an all-time low, staff voicing how undervalued and overwhelmed they are. For the first time, we're seeing more nurses leaving NMC registered and going on. How do you aim to improve this, but also retain staff? Who's going to start? Let's start with Draeyk. Let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that one of the things we need to look at is that the NHS clearly needs investment and is being woefully underfunded. And at the same time, there's never been more demand on NHS services. And this partly goes back to what we need to be investing in, which is a well-being economy. We need to be making sure that people are living their best life they can live, so they're less likely to need to go and use NHS services. So we need to look at ways in which we can skillfully and holistically reduce demand on NHS services. And that means looking at things a little bit more radically and perhaps looking a bit more at healthcare in the community and at home and seeing what we can best do about that. And in terms of investment, we spend something like £150 billion a year on the NHS, which is a phenomenal amount of money. It comes to our, mainly through our national insurance. But that's not a lot when you consider that the NHS is burdened with the clever idea of private enterprise, which PPIs, which are costs, which brought in about £50 billion worth of investment, but they're going to cost us in the region of £300 billion to pay back. £300 billion. And it's just absolutely staggering that we have let privatisation creep into the NHS. And I think it does undermine morale. Because my sister is a healthcare, she looks at a paediatrician in the West Midlands. She's told me firsthand the impact that that's had. It undermines them in terms of the service and the quality of service that they can offer. At the same time, they're being overwhelmed by the asks that are coming forward. And the asks are coming forward are not just about healthcare, but they're also a wide scope of breakdowns which are due to cost of living crisis, people not being able to get good, nutritious food, which is impacting their health, stress, which is impacting their health. So it goes back to, we have to go back to the basics and look, what can we do to actually improve people's life? And that includes staff, and maybe we need to actually make sure that they get decent housing, amongst other things.
You need to wind up.
Oh, and I need to wind up. And I just say this, if we...
Not really.
If we
You're
put...
quite well over, so I think we need to move on.
Okay.
Right, thank you for your understanding.
So I don't think it needs to be said that the NHS is on its knees at the moment. It is instead of it being months for surgeries and appointments, it is now years, and that's just not acceptable. Morale is at its lowest. Staff are leaving the profession, and is it any wonder they're overworked and underpaid? One of the things I see is the creeping privatisation. Now there are some aspects that it is positive to have some privatisation, but it is very limited. We have privatised almost everything in the NHS. You can't even buy a blooming pencil without it going through procurement and a 6-month process. We should be able to trust our healthcare professionals to spend their money wisely. Another thing that has crept in, stuff like staff having to clean their own scrubs and their own clothes. That's just ridiculous. It used to be done in-house. Now it's all outsourced, and they have to take their clothes home and wash them themselves. Another thing, the public-private initiatives that Labour brought in under Blair, they have been an absolute disaster. It's not rooted in free market economics. You can't sell your hospital to a private company to rent back, because if they raise the rent, you can't just move to the hospital next door. There is only one hospital in each town and city. So it was a disaster from the start. That's costing the NHS billions. It could be spending on healthcare. A lot of these optimisations and processes that are just bogging down nurses could be streamlined. A lot of that could go into increasing pay, making it a more attractive profession. We should also be looking at promoting education in healthcare and making that process as easy as possible for young folk here to train to be doctors and nurses.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is a pretty meaty issue, and unsurprisingly it gets a bit more political than a lot of other issues. And that for me is because we've had 14 years of austerity. Austerity isn't just a word, it means less money for public services, and it's been year after year after year that has literally billions of pounds less into public services. Despite what the NHS in Scotland is under huge pressure. I've got relatives who work in the NHS and who feel that pressure every single day that they're out of work. But bizarrely, despite that, it's still the best performing NHS in the UK, which is quite disturbing when you think about it. Despite doing our best to mitigate it, there has to come an end to austerity. Otherwise, we simply will not have the money to maintain the NHS for the population that we have. One of the reasons that there's so much pressure in the NHS is because there's bed walking, and when you join the dots in that, bed walking is essentially caused because people can't get care packages can't be delivered because you can't get care workers can't be found because we stopped freedom of movement because of Brexit that nobody in Scotland actually wanted. So you take all that in the round, and we're really struggling with the combination of the impact of Brexit and the combination with the impact of austerity. The SNP's position is quite clear. We've always said austerity was a bad plan. It's a choice, not a necessity, and it's a choice about how you choose to put your fiscal rules in place. We need to move away from that and we need to invest in our public services. Meanwhile, in the Scottish Parliament, we've got Conservative MSPs who are asking for more money for local government, asking for more money for the NHS, but vote against progressive taxation to try and pay for it. So let's be quite clear. The SNP is a progressive taxation party, and we want to increase the taxes a little bit for the people who can afford it and the companies who can afford it to pay for the public services that we all need, and notably the NHS.
Thank you.
Firstly, thank you for everything you do, because I'm assuming you must be a nurse. And I think one of the things that we did in COVID was thank nurses every Thursday night. We've stopped doing that. And I think that's one of the reasons why our nursing staff are really feeling the cost. We need to thank them all the time. I think one of the issues is that we have capped places in university for nurses and doctors. Yes, all the students get free university tuition, but we've got students locally who can go to university to study nursing and to study medicine, and they can't get in. And all the places have been taken from overseas. That is a problem. My son is studying medicine, and he's already saying he wants to go to Australia because paying conditions is better there. So we need to improve paying conditions in the UK for doctors. The GP doctor contracts, which were brought in the early 2000s, is not working. As a veterinary surgeon, I had to work out of hours. I had to work a 5-day week. I had to do on-call at night. Our medics are not doing that. And we're needing to get them to actually work and do what is required. Your GP is not Monday to Friday 9 to 5. You need to be doing basic stuff in surgeries and weekends. That's what's putting pressure on the A&E system. I also think the social care needs to be a better flow. We need to get the beds emptied. We need to get that. Our IGPs are not being funded properly. We're not getting enough money from the settlement to allow our IGPs to function properly. You know, if we can clear the beds and have social care working effectively, then that will help. And that will also allow the nurses to actually nurse rather than being frustrated at not being able to see patients through and out the door home for recovery.
I actually live this, you know, I work in the community with community nurses delivering health and social care. I'm going to take it from a different angle, because we've all heard about the pay, we've all heard about this. I'm going to say, how about engage your staff? Because also I mentioned at the start, I'm a trade unionist. Unison Grampian Health, just so anyone wants to join, is that the amount of letters we have to send to Scottish Health Secretary to even get a reply in the last few months about the pay deal that was already negotiated, that will tell you why morale's low, so you don't get engaged by government. We're sick and tired of basically being taken round the bend. I worked at the Oil, and then I heard all the nonsense that went on there about why that shut, when they said it was due to staffing. No, there was plenty of staff there. They wanted to build and shut, because the reason they wanted to build and shut was because there wasn't enough money pumped in. So how does a trust make money? Selling off property, getting rid of staff. That's how you make money as a trust. We get frustrated because we see the services going down. We get frustrated because we don't feel engaged with. There's no career progression for a lot of people. If you have a service like a Dr. Gray's, where it's basically becoming blocked, there's no specialist nursing. Nothing there. There's nothing further. So you have to move away to get promoted. I'm the most trained I've ever been in my career. And I'm dealing mostly with social care cases at this point. Until we solve the social care crisis, the majority of problems within healthcare will not be solved. It's going to take some tough and real decisions to do this. We talk about immigration, which is absolutely correct, yeah? But here's an idea. Why don't we pay our carers a proper wage, and then they might actually want to do the job? Here's an idea. Why don't the housing that we're building for people actually make it accessible for the disabled and the people who need to go in there? The amount of times I have to try and shower someone in a box is beyond counting. Probably hear it, it's so frustrating when I just hear about, you know what, I'd rather do without the platform, and I'd rather do some solutions to the actual health service. That's what I'd rather do without.
Thank you very much, James. Neil?
Firstly, again, I'd like to also thank you for your services, nurse my sisters, nurse down in Fort Valley, and hearing the horror stories, for lack of a better word. I'm going to firstly touch on that. I find it quite frustrating that we as a panel have sat here and all spoke about the NHS, but we've not looked at our kind of local NHS issues. Nobody's mentioned the maternity ward still not up and running at Dr. Grace. No one's mentioned that there's only one mental health practitioner and it's based in Nairn, so it's done in Moray. And no one's mentioning the elephant in the room, that saying that the Scottish NHS is performing better than the rest of the UK is like me saying after last night, oh well, Scotland might be out of Euros, but at least it scored against Germany. And we didn't even score that goal. The NHS is on its knees. Mental health, we are facing an epidemic. We need to deal with these problems and we need to deal with them yesterday. That includes what we're proposing is we want to put a tax on social media giants like Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, the ones that are causing a big part of the problem on mental health, and we want to put mental health practitioners in our NHS. That will help lighten the load straight away. We should be giving our NHS staff fair pay deals, and also we should be lightening the load, because Burkhead and Hopeman should not be having GP surgery shutting down. It's an absolute disgrace, and we need to train more GPs in this country, and that will prevent these surgeries from shutting down. That will lighten the load on our local healthcare in Moray, and that is how we can really respect NHS workers.
Thank you. So, Ali, let's come back to you. What are you hearing and how are you feeling about this?
I'm not sure whether I answered the whole question, because I'm from probably one of the most political ones, as my role is within CAMS, it's mental health, so we have huge phenomenal wait lists, and as a practitioner it's really difficult in soul destroying, asking for people when people coming in asking for help, and I have to prioritise what that help looks like, and that's really difficult. So when I was talking about staff for help, it's actually on the ground that we're concerned. Also asked about there's more leaving the register, that's my age group that's leaving, who's having the late 40s, early 50s, who's thinking, this is not why I came into nursing in the first place. So we're not having people coming in, we're having people leaving. People that are coming in after student nursery couldn't get accommodation for William and had to sleep in a car because Strathspey didn't cover her room and board for the 6 weeks placement. This is real things that are happening out there. It's not happening outside, it's happening on your doorstep. And even things like getting nurses in, getting staff in, they don't exist in CAMS, they're very difficult to train, it's a long process. And even when we get the funding, we have to go to a board and beg as a system called grip and control.
So if I could put you on the spot again, I know you're not a politician, you're working in mental health. But if there was something that you would suggest, like one or two things that you feel like that would make a real difference to this question that you raised, what might, from your perspective, what might you be suggesting?
Start listening, for the government to actually listen to what we're saying, because it feels very much in their ears. It feels very much like looking service, we do eye matters, we do questionnaires, but nothing actually changes. So it's about start listening to the staff and making us feel heard.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's see what else I think this is probably going to be our last kind of area because we're running towards the end of time. But let's hear a few other perspectives on this question of the National Health Service. Can we pass to you?
Yeah, thank you.
Behind, yeah, let's start with you. The white one. Thanks.
Good evening. I was a nurse, but a long time ago. It's not just throwing money at it. It's got to be restructured. It's got to be thought out. It's more than just throwing money at it. When I trained on the ward. And that's where the nurses should be being trained, on the ward, to be a nurse. University is not the place for your everyday, basic nurse.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I trained as a nurse in the early 80s. Morale was crap then. Throughout my career, morale has been pretty awful. As I progressed from nurse to hospital manager to working for the English government as the National Programme and Waiting List back in the to working as an executive director here in North Scotland, where I was in Pratt. What I haven't heard today is a solution at a policy level. We're here to look at you as candidates to vote for the general election. We can listen to people, and absolutely that's necessary. But what are you going to do for the NHS and the social care system at a policy level that will strategically change and reform all of the problems that everybody has espoused today? Because I've not heard it.
Anybody else want to make a comment to this topic? Yes. Thanks.
Tuition fees, which were introduced some years ago in Scotland, which is an excellent situation. But I think if you check with some of the universities, what they are doing, because they're short of money, is actually making sure that all the 2/3 of the number of doctors going into out of university or elsewhere come from either England or abroad. And that's because the university requires funding, and they get it by these people paying full fees. Now, I'm not against having the fees underwritten by the Scottish Government, but what I am against is that the organisations of the universities are using that as a way of funding. The government should fund the universities correctly. Then we get the doctors and the nurses. Probably, like the other person said, nurses don't really require to be university trained.
Thank you.
Hiya, I am a nurse in Forest. There's a couple of things I'd like to clarify. I've worked for 20 years, never had my uniform washed in England, so I've worked in Peterborough, London and up here. I think that's Mum was a nurse, when was your uniform last washed? So that's the first headline. Our GPs do not work 9 to 5. The GPs are in that surgery 7:15, 7:30 in the morning. There are times that James and I will leave at 8, the GPs are there. The GPs are there on a Saturday morning. However, a lot of the time, the GP, well, first of all, I'd like to say, if we want GPs, we want female GPs, we need childcare. My 83-year-old mother is the only reason I can work 8 to 6. There's no childcare. I live in Contessa. There's nowhere for my children to go. If it hadn't been for my mum, I couldn't work. And same with the GPs. If I look at the screen this morning, the things that are coming in, it's things that people can deal with themselves. They're in up for paracetamol. I think we need to take a look at ourselves and what we can do for ourselves. James and I, yes, I'm university educated, I'm learning, doing a master's degree to be a prescriber, but I'm spending a lot of my time washing people, which is fine because there's nobody else to do it. So this time next year, I will wash you, then I'll put your syringe driver up for end of life. So I disagree that it's got to be university, it shouldn't be university trained. I need that because I'm prescribing morphine.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to close this round here now also. Of course, there's much more to be said about this and many other topics. We have a long list of questions around all sorts of fascinating things, but we do need to keep to our time. So we're going to move into a closing phase now. I'm going to invite each of the candidates to have a couple of minutes for some closing comments. You can pick up, of course, on any of the themes that have surfaced during the evening that you feel you haven't responded to, or you can make a general pitch. It's entirely up to you. But we'll start maybe the way that we're finishing maybe the way that we started, just inviting kind of volunteers to choose the order you want to go in. You want to start again? Okay.
Start with my London.
Yes.
First of all, I would be very frightened to go back in the office if I describe any of the girls as like box standard nurses or something. Thank you all for coming, because I know you might all be happy with answers and things like that. Feel free to come speak to me afterwards if you want more clarification or something. But without people actually coming out and being passionate, actually caring about this stuff, then we don't actually move forward. I just want to say, whoever gets elected, who gets the honour of being elected, this is public service, this is the greatest honour you can get. My life is basically being public service. And I feel like we need to remember it's not just, point scoring, it's also holding our own parties to account as well, because it's very easy to make promises and then go in and you'll become basically another boot on the ground. So all I can promise is I can't wave a magic wand and fix everyone's problems, but I can promise I'll work bloody hard to try and fix some of them. Thank you.
Who wants to go next? You want to go next, sorry?
Yeah, I started off talking about I suppose about the ABCs, austerity, Brexit and cost of living, and that is the issues that are coming up on the doorstep time after time after time. The SNP has put that at the heart of our campaign. We have campaigned vigorously against austerity budgeting for years, and we will continue to do that because fundamentally the public services that people have, issues that people have raised in the audience tonight are driven by the finances that are available. Governments for far too long have been afraid to have a discussion with the public about how much money people are prepared to pay for the services that they want to receive. And that is not a sustainable position when we have when people are living longer, that they require access to services for longer in their life. And we should absolutely be providing those services, but we have to have serious conversations about how that's paid for. And that's why I don't shy away from issues like progressive taxation. I think that's the right thing to do because I think these services are absolutely critical. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I can change NHS policy or that I can decide what infrastructure projects are going to be invested in. Nobody here who for elected as an MP will be able to vote on any of those things. That's the Scottish Parliament does that, MSPs are there to be lobbied, and I will work very closely with MSPs if I'm elected, and I will lobby them myself, and I will lobby ministers as I have always done about issues in this area. But the biggest thing that an MP from this area can do is go down to Westminster and ensure that the devolved administrations, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, all have the resources at their disposal to be able to make the best possible decisions for the communities that they serve. And that, I think, is one of the biggest contributions that an MP can make. We can work cross-party on a wide variety of issues. There are 3 councillors on this panel tonight who we all work together on different issues at different points, and there are sometimes fundamental issues that we disagree on. But it is possible to work cross-party. I believe we can do that where it's necessary, but I also believe it's important to stick to your principles where you should. And one of those principles, as I said earlier, is my view that Scotland should be an independent country, and I'll always campaign for that.
Right, so a lot of you maybe before this election haven't heard of the Scottish Family Party, and I'm sure a lot of you don't agree with our policies, but we are opening a debate in a lot of issues that we haven't heard for quite a long time in Scottish politics. The root of my politics comes from my newfound faith. Most of my views are based on my Christian faith. I became a Christian quite recently this year, and it's really changed my life. And I think we talk about, one of the issues, we talk about too much about taking parents and kids and separating them, getting parents back to work and putting kids into care, and I don't think that's right. We shouldn't view parents as just GDP. We shouldn't view them just as numbers. We should allow them the choice. If one of them wants to stay at home with their kids and help them develop, that should be available. That's why we're for a marriage tax allowance that would allow a mum or dad to transfer their allowance to the spouse, so that one of them could stay at home if they want to. I think that's a perfectly valid choice. You can be a mother and you can work, you can be a father and you can stay at home. I think we shouldn't be discriminating against parents when it comes to raising their kids. We should be encouraging it, because we should be looking for what's best for kids. One of the other policies that I take real issue with, quite bonkers, is this idea of the 2-child benefit cap, as if parents have kids just to claim benefits. It's a ridiculous idea. Parents don't just have kids to have benefits. Some parents just fall on hard times. And I think it's a ridiculous thing that discourages folk from having kids, and it punishes parents who have fallen on hard times and have lots of kids. We should value all human life. I'm not going to make any secret about that. that I think every single person is valuable, that the rights should be equal, and that is from conception to natural death. I think that's a very important thing, is that we should value all human life, and that's all from me. Cheers.
Yeah, again, thank you for the invitation tonight, and thank you for the tough and thought-provoking questions. As you have witnessed, I'm not a career politician. I have lived experience and wish to bring this to Parliament, along with your experiences, so that I can truly represent our local residents on the matters that mean the most to them. I'm a huge believer in collegiate working. I have had to lead and be part of a team my whole professional life. The vet cannot function without a good nurse, a great receptionist, and a brilliant cleaner. I have brought this approach to my role as leader of the council and have managed to reach a cross-party budget for the first time in 10 years at Moray Council. If elected, I would continue this theme and ensure that as MP, I work with MSPs and councillors and other bordering MPs, MSPs and councillors to ensure that we promote and do the best for the north of Scotland as a whole, as well as the Moray West, Nairn and Strathspey constituency. Problems like our NHS, climate, security need everybody around the table to fix them, to find a common path, and not frame a binary black and white argument. I haven't sat here and decried other parties or candidates or policies. We have to stop the mudslinging and the toxic nature of politics. We need to bring back trust into the frame, and I intend to play my part in bringing this back to public life.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to go now. Yes, thank you everybody. And I think that, I started off talking about my love of nature, and one of the things that is imperative to me is how we can learn from nature. And what I learned from nature is cooperation. It's about ecosystems working together. And if you like, we can think of ourselves as ecosystems in the way that we function as communities, families, friendship groups, nations. We're all ecosystems, and we all need to work together, and I'm heartened to hear some of the collaborative conversations I'm hearing. I'd love to see that going forward and continue to go forward. And what is also important about learning from nature is that it's a diverse system. Its diversity is what's key. We must have diversity, and it's what supports this planet that we live on, that we call home. And we've had only one home. There is no, as they say, planet B. There is just this one. And so we need to embrace that diversity and do all we can to do that, because we need a healthy planet. Because when we've got a healthy planet, we've got healthy people. And we've got healthy people, we've got a healthy society. So it all connects together. And this is why the Scottish Greens are very, very much about having a well-being economy, because it means fundamentally looking again at the way we structure our society, and that we shouldn't value ourselves and what we're up to solely on financial return, solely on a GDP. It should be about sharing the resources that we have, not just in this country, but around the world, because we are one planet, one people. And in all of that, we need to look for the commons. Where do we have commons? Where do we have things that we share? And this goes back to how we organise ourselves in the conversation earlier about civic pride. Find the commons. It's very easy to find the things that pull us apart, but there's a heck of a lot that brings us together. So focus on that. And the final thing I'll say is we need to have a wealth tax. There are people in this country, billionaires, who have vast amounts of money, clearly. And if we just put a 1% tax on those billionaires, we would bring in between 70 and 130 billion pounds a year. And those billionaires want to give that money away. Some of them do, but many of them don't. But we should make sure that they do. Thank you.
Look, these evenings are good consensus on things like green energy. I'm really glad that everybody here seems to be on board with our long-standing policy of proportional representation, so that's nice. But what's at its heart of this election is our politics is broken. We want to change our fundamental systems. We want to reform the House of Lords, change the voting system, so that makes every single vote in this room count. Every single one, not just a select few. But at the heart of that, for me, I'm standing because I care passion for this community. I play for my rugby club, I live and work here as a game designer in Elgin. And I think that there's not enough local priorities being put at the heart of our campaigning and at the heart of why we want to represent you. It's why local priorities are at the heart of my campaign, things like returning the maternity ward, things like the 96 infrastructure, things like mental health treatment and sewage dumping being prevented in our rivers and waterways. That's local priorities, that's what my politics is about, and we've heard once already that we don't have an influence and governments can't work together. We absolutely should be. There's been far too much mudslinging between Westminster and Holyrood. Far too much, and it also goes down and extends into local councils. We need to empower our local councillors for the devolution. We need to actually have two governments that aren't taking us for granted, like I was saying earlier, and putting the people that elect the government to put it first. That's why I'm standing. It's what I represent in my politics, and if I'm lucky enough to be elected on 4th of July, I will stand up for those local priorities like I do on campaigning for victims of domestic abuse, the housing support which my council passed. I'm a hard worker, it's what I do, and no matter who you vote for on 4th of July, please make sure you go vote.
So thank you all very, very much. Coming to the few kind of closing announcements. First of all, I just really want to thank everybody on the panel. I feel like you've shown your hearts and your